Open Your Eyes is brought to you by the Belize Bank. Our country, your bank.
Good morning. Welcome to Open Your Eyes.
Start your morning right.
I'm Marlene Cuellar,
And I'm Asana Kayatama.
and thank you for joining us this morning.
It is the 9th of December, 2020.
That's right.
School is about to be out for kids this week.
That's
And everybody's definitely in the full swing and mood of Christmas.
That is definitely a parent's perspective. I didn't realize school was finishing this week.
Yes, yes. Indeed, it is a parent's
I
perspective.
know.
It's report card week.
That's why it's on your mind. I get
All
it.
of these things, Marlene.
And I know some kids are preparing for exams this
Yeah.
week as well.
Yeah.
So that's a critical time. Poor things must be lacking sleep and extra stressed.
But it's the beginning of the work week for most of us who are professionals, right?
That's right. And collectively, we are all getting into gear for Christmas. I think even the last minute people are starting to get their preparations in order now.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to check in on our weather for today. And we have Angelia Guy on the line. Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
How are you today?
Good, and you?
Not too bad. So tell us, what type of weather are we expecting for today?
Okay, we're expecting similar weather to over the weekend, mild and fair conditions.
Okay. And the 24-hour forecast?
Okay, we're expecting skies to be sunny over most of the country, except for over the south. It will be a little bit cloudy this morning, and then we expect clear to partly cloudy skies tonight, and little to no rainfall is expected over the next 24 hours.
All right. And what about our winds?
Okay, winds will blow from the east and southeast at 5 to 15 knots.
All right. And those high temperatures for today?
Okay, high temperatures today will continue on the mild side, peaking at about 84 degrees Fahrenheit along the coast, 88 inland, and 76 in the hills.
All right. And for tonight, what are we expecting?
Tonight, low temperatures will fall to about 78 degrees Fahrenheit along the coast, 68 inland, and 64 in the hills, a little less cool than last night.
Yeah. And what about the extended forecast? Are we expecting any major shifts in the next few days?
We're expecting a change on around Wednesday. We're expecting a few showers and possible isolated thunderstorms over the country on Wednesday.
Okay. And for tomorrow, it's going to be much of the same?
Yes, tomorrow should be similar.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that update.
You're welcome.
You have a great day today.
Thank you, too.
All right. There you have it.
I'm not complaining, Marlene.
Yeah, I like the cool nights. Yesterday was a bit warm, though. I know I'm complaining, but it was warm.
It gets cool in the late night hours, which is okay.
I do appreciate that much. And you know what? I know a lot of people are doing work on their homes, and they need dry weather and good sun, and so they have all of that for now.
That is good.
Especially if they're out shopping, and it's a lot more convenient when it's dry. So I'll take that into consideration.
There we go.
All right, we're going to shift gears to a bit of motivation for this Monday morning, and that means it's time for our Eye Opener. And our Eye Opener, taken from dailyom.com, goes like this. Be generous with your inner gifts. They will be well received. When the holidays come around, most of us join the masses in shopping for gifts, wrapping them, and giving them away. Once we are in the mindset that this is what we are going to do, we don't hold back or struggle with the process. We simply give the presents we've acquired, letting them go in the awareness that they were never ours anyway. If we could apply some of this unquestioning generosity with our own inner resources and gifts, we might be able to give of ourselves more freely. When we truly value what we have to offer, our presentation honors what lies inside it. We speak well of our talents and introduce them with confidence and panache. Like a performer who chooses carefully what to wear and how to set the stage, we provide an environment that complements and enhances what we have to offer. Far from being superficial, a beautiful presentation is as much a part of the energy of gift giving as the gift itself. All these things together, the gift, the presentation, and the giving away, make up the joyful experience of bestowing our offerings upon the world.
All right, so let me tackle the first point that I want to raise, having followed this morning's eye-opener. For me, everyone is born with a certain gift or talent, right? And that is very intrinsic to that individual. That's the gift that God gave you. For like, if I look at myself, I'll use myself as the example here. There is a gift of knowledge, right? You're a naturally smart person. You know, things just have a way. You have an aura. If you were to impart that gift, right, so that you teach those around you, ideally that would be the right thing to do so that other people can elevate to a certain enlightenment, so to speak. But when I look at the bottom half of the eye-opener, so to speak, it's also in the presentation, right? Because not only would I be an otherwise intelligent person, but if I don't know how to properly share that knowledge so that others can warmly receive what I'm passing on, it comes off a certain kind of way that may rub people the wrong way, right? So that is figuratively looking at what the eye-opener is saying. If you were to look at it from a literal sense, the idea of wrapping a gift and presenting it, it sort of has a similar effect, where perhaps you've gone above and beyond to purchase something that you know the other person who is on the receiving end would appreciate. But if you don't take the time in putting it together properly in terms of how you present it, like for argument's sake, you purchase a nice, reasonably expensive gift that you know your partner or someone else would appreciate, but you didn't buy the wrapping paper, you just give it to them in the same plastic bag that it says something.
It's not the same thing.
Exactly.
Right.
It says something, right? And so that's why I'm looking at the eye-opener today by making that comparison.
And I think a key part of it, you know, it's a beautiful eye-opener, I have to say that much, because I think it's just a reminder that it's exactly what you said. We all are blessed with particular gifts, and that's something that sometimes we struggle to be able to acknowledge. Some of us are comfortable enough to be able to recognize those gifts, but there are a lot of people out there who think that they have nothing to offer. And I think that jumping off on that point is key to me, that we have to recognize, or we should recognize, that we all have something that we can share with other people. Sometimes you can find it most easily in artists, whether they're visual or singers or performance arts, whatever it is, they have that art, they have that talent, they have that gift, and it's such a lovely thing when they can share it. Creatives in general, I think, also have that capacity. But sometimes your gift is simply how you affect other people. It's how you interact with other people. Maybe you're a comedian and you make people laugh. Maybe you're just an energetic person and you share that energy. Maybe you're a warm person or a thoughtful person or a good listener. Yeah, that's a great gift to give away sometimes. And so I think one is being able to have enough belief in yourself to see that you do have gifts and recognizing what those are. A great way is to see, you just rely on what people tell you. If you consistently hear, I love talking to you, you give such great advice, clearly this is an area you're good at. So it's recognizing it and then being able to share it. And you talked about the gift wrapping, and for me, it just all boiled down to the same thing, motives. What is the intention that you have when you give any gift away? We spoke about this just last week with political favors, but this is different. If you're giving away a gift, and we hear it all the time with Chris Kingle around the country, where it's like, oh, I paid so much for this one, and they only gave me a cheap gift. You're not giving with the right intention. You're giving with the expectation of what you're receiving. And so I think even when you're giving out your inner gifts, it has to be with generosity and with no expectation of reciprocity, because then it's not quite the best gift wrapping to be giving it away with.
Can I expand on that briefly? The idea of the Chris Kindle is the perfect example that you've raised. I could recall, Marlene, that as a child, you sort of had to participate in the game in the primary school level, all right? And so some of us walked away with great experiences having played the game. Some of us walked away with a bitter taste in our mouth, right? And as I grew older, I realized that it has, it has to do with what you can afford and what thought process went into identifying a gift that works for the person you're giving it to. I say that because there's a classic example of, for instance, you get someone who's well-to-do, their parents have the means to be able to purchase the brand new fire truck, right? That's what you got from your KK. But your parents may not have the same wherewithal to be able to go and order something online, for instance, and have you deliver it or give it away as a gift. But it's the best that they could afford. And they've allowed you the opportunity to choose that gift for your KK because perhaps you know that person in the classroom. The idea here is what that person thinks or how that person accepts what is being given to him or her. Because look at it, you got the fire truck because the person who had your name has the means to be able to get that. But you know, your parents are probably not there. Or in some cases, maybe they're there, but they never prioritized you participating in the KK. So now you end up having to give someone something that, for all intents and purposes, that person looks at you and says, well, only this? Because I know I've spent $50 giving away a gift to someone else. So it kind of goes both ways. And as I got older, as I was saying, I started looking at it. I said, you know what, but I can't fault someone else for giving me a gift that I may not have been looking forward to when I know that I've given someone something that made their day. It's just the way things are. And you just
That's why thankfully now they put caps on spending, spending limits on what they can
in the
do
workplace
in classroom.
probably. Maybe at school too.
No, at
they've
schools,
reduced it.
The workplace, I'm not sure, but But I think just the idea of it. I think when we and it's something we do have to teach kids, and it's really hard for them to learn, but it's just take practice. To kind of understand that it's the intention that comes with the gift giving and being grateful for receiving that gift, whether it's something you were really looking forward to or something that's lackluster.
Well, the idea to me is going into it with an open mind. That you will receive something small on a daily basis, and then the final one you'll get something that works.
So, with that said, don't be fearful of giving away your inner gifts today. Right, we got to get moving. It is a Monday morning, and there is a lot to discuss. We're going to catch up on some of the big stories from last week and over the weekend and look forward to the week ahead. So let's shift gears to Eye on the News.
All right, so I want to do two things this morning. Both general conversations, in a manner of speaking. The first has to do with the number of missing person reports that we've covered since the beginning of the year
Yeah.
against the number of murders or death reports, so to speak, that have come as a result of persons being unaccounted for.
Yeah.
That's the first thing I want to touch on in the Iona News today as we begin to recap 2019.
Yeah.
The other one would be similarly the number of drug planes that have landed since the beginning of the year, right? We're not going to make any correlation between the two. We're looking at it individually.
Yeah.
Suffice to say that there seems to have been an increase in either of those two areas that we're going to discuss. The first one, right? When I look at, I was doing a story 2 weeks ago with the disappearance of the 3 young men who went fishing. And while I was doing the research in our archives, I realized that since January of this year, we have had fishermen going missing at sea in one particular location, right? This would be in the vicinity of Map Key, which is 5 to 6 miles off the coast of Belize City.
Yeah.
That was one. And then I look at the number of instances where families have come forward to report missing teenagers or missing young men in this case, only for them to turn up dead a few days later.
Yeah.
So it's not that these individuals are quote unquote running away from home, because normally when we think missing, they run away for a day or two and they'll come back. Something perhaps happened at home, they weren't happy with it.
Well, especially when it's minors.
Yeah. This is a totally different scenario we're looking at, right? We look at the situation of Densmore Bowman, who remains unaccounted for after he was last seen somewhere in the vicinity of Market Square, Belmopan, a week or so ago. There are particular items of his personal effects that have been found, but they still have not been able to find him alive or recover his remains. Michael Cobo, right? He left from San Pedro. He told his mother and his family that he was coming to Belize City to attend a party or to socialize with friends of his here. This was on Friday. His mother could have given an account of everything up to a certain time when communication ceased, right? Only for him to turn up in the area of the port of Belize, wrapped up and sunken in the waters off the coast, right? So you're looking at all of these, and another situation that comes to mind immediately was one where there was an individual from Sand Hill Village a couple of months back, where his family was frantically looking for him as well. And a couple days later, he was found dead. So, and those are just examples that come off the top of my head, right? But if I were to look at all of these reports, all of these cases, and actually trace the outcome of it, it's safe to say that there has been an uptick in persons being reported missing and turning up dead.
Yeah, and I think one of the ways that you can see that this has kind of shifted to become a part of the norm is when you do that first report with a missing with the family of a missing person, and quite a number of them are already assuming that they're dead.
Yeah.
Where we used to see in the past where people had that hope, you know, a week later, 2 weeks later, still searching. And now, you know, it's a matter of 2-3 days and people are saying, well, you know, we just want to find the body. Now, I mean, I don't know how to, we would just make assumptions as to the motives behind all of these, because it differs. Some of these missing persons are people who are headed out to sea and turn up dead. Some of them are really random incidents, like the teacher who went over to Melchor, or not random, but individual instances. Michael Cobo, and several others. And I can think of the young women as well who've gone missing and turned up dead as well. And you're right, you know, I can flash back in my mind the number of stories we've done with search parties going out just this year alone. So it does seem to be a situation where things are changing in terms of how crimes are being committed, and also just the way people are being killed. That's what scares
Yeah.
me sometimes. You know, you're talking about decapitations happening more often. Michael Kobo, the way he was found, the attempts to cover it up, or a woman being found in a garbage container. You know, it's becoming so callous and so cold, and very concerning for, I think, the broader society. I don't want to say that we got used to shooting victims and stabbing victims, but for the most part, that's what we used to hear about. And now
You would say that it's sort of like a modus operandi that we've sort of come to expect, not used to, come to expect. But when you see the landscape change insofar as how crimes are being committed, it's what raises.
it's really
that alarm.
concerning. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
really concerning, the level of anger and hate that has gone into some of these crimes, and plotting as well, because some of these people have been they went missing in just their regular functions. So
Yeah.
clearly they're being monitored, intercepted some way along their regular daily life. So it shows that people are putting planning into it as well. And yeah, I hear you with the missing persons, and hopefully we can be able to move away from what has become this reality. But it is absolutely concerning. We're approaching, actually, if you think about it, the 1-year mark for Anisha Young. There's
I was
still
thinking the very
no
same thing. Yep.
information, nothing. You know, 1 year later, a young woman vanished.
Into
And we have
thin air.
no information, nothing,
Yeah.
no person charged, no. There was a DNA test that was inconclusive, and that's all we have, and that has to be a horror for the family every single day,
Yeah.
not knowing where your loved one is.
I think in a case such as that, Marlene, families are looking for closure,
Absolutely.
because beyond a certain number of days, that glimmer of hope completely goes away, and then you just want to be able to find a body and just give it the proper burial than not knowing where that person is in the country, right? So that's one critical area I wanted to touch on this morning.
Yeah.
The second has been the rise in the number of drug planes that have landed in the country since the beginning of this year. I know it's a perennial thing, as we would say, but for 2019, those numbers seems to be pretty much up there. When we look at another burnt drug plane, or the remains of a burnt drug plane that was discovered on Friday morning,
Yeah.
right? And when you look at what the response is and what the relevant law enforcement apparatus is able to do to either stem, to either frustrate,
Yeah.
or to either apprehend and make certain
Yeah.
arrests. When you look at all of those factors, I don't know where we are. I mean, one would argue that we're lacking in terms of being able to properly respond and stop, or properly be able to make the seizure and what have you. I've been on at least 2 drug planes and drug destructions for this year. But when you look at the amount that have slipped through the cracks, it's not even a crack at this point, it's like a gaping hole.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Listen, when it becomes such a huge problem that you have people making it into a joke. There was the song that an artist made about drug planes landing in Belize. That's to show you how much people have paid attention to the frequency with which it happens. Now, I have to be clear, and this is, you know, drug planes don't just land. It takes cooperation.
And coordination in
and
terms
it
of
takes
knowing where
coordination.
you're going, what have you.
And I'm not just talking about with the people on the plane. I'm talking with people on the ground. So there are people in this country who are involved in cooperating or coordinating these landings. And I think the frequency, we've heard the spin where, you know, they're detected because of investigative work. I don't find that to be as accurate as it's being painted, because had it been interception work, then perhaps we would have had more charges, more persons found.
Higher rate of
yeah.
detection and apprehension.
Yeah, so it shows that there is a very active, very vibrant culture of the drug trade that's taking place in the country, and that is absolutely clear. Now, is it a matter of us not having the resources, the radars, the sufficient people to go out, or a lack of will to be able to pursue it? I can't say, but I do know that if we continue seeing this happening so frequently, then it does show. I mean, we have to get it under control. It doesn't look good for us to be a country that we can't handle this problem.
Small country.
Yeah.
Right. I'll put this out there. There was a press brief that was held in Belmopan several months back, where, in light of the landing of a drug plane, I believe this one would have been in along the coastal road. I had asked the Commissioner of Police if there has been any discussion at the national security level, right, to be able to erect certain outposts in what would be considered the hotspot areas of the country. I know there's a corner pocket in the north where there's the Blue Creek community, that area back there. Would they consider putting men on the ground on a permanent basis on a rotation there? Similarly, perhaps to areas in the coastal road or the Sarstone, we know that planes are landing there as well. And so the Compol, if I recall correctly, told me that they would not divulge their operational strategy. But now the question is that strategy even working? Because when you look at this, and this is just Friday, it's in the same general vicinity.
Yeah, if we put all the planes that have been found on a map, they're all going to be concentrated in very specific areas.
If you were to triangulate all of that, it's
But I'll give you a better example. It was about a month ago, and I know Belize City residents may remember it, where it was about 11 o'clock at night, and everyone heard a plane flying low over the city. And I remember the commissioner being asked about it. He said he heard too. No one knew where that plane landed. Nobody knew what plane it was. But it leads me to understand that where, even in rural communities, when these planes are hovering like that, if all of Belize City could hear one plane, then the communities can hear as well. So something, and I have to be honest and say, I know that this is, when it comes to these types of movements, it's extremely dangerous for everyone involved. And that's why I say it goes back to whether or not they're adequately resourced, whether they're adequately trained, or whether there's adequate will to go after these. But it has been a concerning issue for this year.
So those are two major points that we wanted to discuss. Before we wrap the Eye on the News, however, yesterday morning, Sunday, there was news coming out of Dangriga of a body at the seafront. I was sent the image of the recovery. We won't use it because it's fairly graphic, but so there is that incident being investigated as a murder. And late last night, I guess minutes to 11, one of our colleagues down south, Will Mejia, had informed of what to them sounded like shooting or gunshots, and reportedly one person has died as a result. So we do have areas in Dangriga and Punta Gorda to provide coverage from today in terms of following up on those reports.
All right.
So that concludes our Eye on the News for this morning.
All right, we're going to get ready to move into our show for today, but just one very quick reminder, of course, that Gimme 5 wrapped up last week, and that was our anniversary celebration and our Christmas kickoff. And I just want to recap the winners for the final night, and that included the grand prize. So the first winner was Edward Robinson. The second was Zoila Sabito. The third was Clinton Montero. And then the fourth was Laverne Robinson. The fifth was Carol Williams. And the grand prize winner was Camille Pat. Remember that you can come out and claim those prizes starting this week, starting today actually, at Channel 5 during opening hours, right? And now we got to get moving into our show.
Yes. So our show this morning, Marlene, comprises of a two-part panel discussion
Yeah.
as we discuss the United Nations Conventions Against Corruption, the UNCAC.
Yeah.
That's been around for a while, and
3
so
years.
yeah, we need to know where we are and what we look forward to in 2020.
Yeah. All right, and then we're going to close off because it is the Christmas season. We're going to have a conversation with Brad Patico about some Christmas music. And that's going to keep us in the mood for Christmas as we keep on moving towards December 25th. But that's our lineup. We're going to go ahead and take a break. Before we do, though, we have that birthday shout out. And we are saying happy birthday to
Dharma Thompson. Happy birthday, Dharma. There she is.
Do enjoy your day. We're going to go ahead and take that break now. When we come back, we'll have our first conversation for the morning. So please stay tuned.
With over 100 years of service excellence in Belize, the Belize Bank Limited
And welcome back. We're officially kicking off our first segment, which is a discussion, a panel discussion this morning on the UNCAC and where we have been so far over the past 3 years since we signed on to that convention. With us this morning is the president of the Belize Network of NGOs, Osmani Salas. Good morning. We also have the president of the National Trade Union Congress of Belize, Marvin Mora. And we also have the representative of the Belize Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Giacomo Sanchez.
Good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
We were having a discussion prior to opening up this segment that today we're actually celebrating 3 years. It's our third anniversary of having signed on to the United Nations Convention Against Corruption. Is it a milestone, or where are we since that endorsement? Where do we begin?
It is a milestone, but before I comment, a quick correction, Isani, in the introduction. I am not the president of the Belize Network of NGOs. I'm the senator representing them.
No problem.
But Ms. Froila Salam is the
president,
chairperson of the network.
Yeah.
Stand
That's a
corrected.
quick correction.
No problem. That's
Yeah.
fine.
It is a milestone. 3 years ago, after a lot of effort and advocacy on the part of the business community and the teachers of our country. If you recall, October 2016, this country was shut down for 11 days.
Yep.
One of the demands made was for the government to sign on to UNCAC,
That's right.
and which was done exactly 3 years ago today. So that is a milestone that we signed on to that convention, because I recall, and the BNN did not exist at the time. I recall that the Prime Minister saying that it would be extremely challenging if we would sign on to UNCAC to implement it, extremely costly, which really, has made many people question the political will to implement UNCAC, even from its signing 3 years ago. But it is still a milestone that we have signed on to that convention, and here we are 3 years later.
Can I get some response from you guys as well, insofar as what you've seen take place over the past 3 years in respect of UNCAC?
Not much. The first that was indeed an accomplishment was the establishment of the steering committee.
Yeah.
That would, in essence, be responsible for the monitoring of the implementation of some of the recommendations. We've also seen the review that has been done already that basically assesses the country's ability to function in areas to address certain areas of anti-corruption. But that in itself is not an accomplishment if the recommendations are not put in place, or if there is nothing done to address the areas where we're lax and we need some tightening up. So for the NTUCB, this has been more than frustrating, because we've had people attending the meetings, and the meetings are not happening. So what can we say other than the facts?
So what are you saying? It's no longer a priority?
Well, apparently that would seem to be the order of the day for the government.
There's a bit of information I'd like to get out before we move into looking at where we are today. And Giacomo, you can help us with this. There are actually, once you sign on to a convention, there's certain steps that have to take place, which includes kind of like getting your baseline, where are you, what not. And those were processes that took a bit of time as well. Can you shed some light on that?
To the extent of the process in getting us where we are in terms of at least the country assessment.
Yes.
There had to be quite a bit of, in terms of the learning curve. So there were some visits to Vienna by our public officials, and they came back, imparted the information, and so there was a lot of momentum created in terms of ensuring that we at least target the first two components of the convention, having to do with preventative measures and criminalization and law enforcement. So with the gap assessment having been completed, that set the stage for the folks from Tuvalu to visit and do their assessment, and with the help of now seeing the executive summary out of that process, I think we've lost some momentum and focus, and I think I must thank the civil society partners for inviting the chamber as we always get together, because I mean like everyone else, we want to see where we maintain the fight, so to speak, to ensure that there is some impact as it relates to how our country is governed, not only now but going into the future.
Yeah. And so there was the country assessment that had to be done. We had visiting nations, Tuvalu and Haiti had to come in to see where we are in terms of the level of corruption, what's in place, what kind of preventative measures exist. I know we also had teams go out to other countries as well. I think you went to Jamaica.
We had a
to
delegation.
see some of the work that had been implemented there.
And that was a very useful visit.
Yes.
We had the opportunity, Mr. Sanchez and I and others from the project board, led by the Solicitor General at the time, Mr. Hawk, Nigel Hawk, went on a visit to Jamaica. We met with several of their commissions, the Office of the Contractor General, their Integrity Commission, their Electoral Commission, and a number of other bodies. And they were open with us. And even though Jamaica itself is battling with corruption, what really struck me is that they have been putting systems in place. And we can compare to a great extent Belize and Jamaica, and we came back with some excellent ideas. So as Mr. Sanchez was saying earlier, 2017 into 2018 was an active period at the project board that was set up to oversee the implementation of the UNCAC Convention. But as of August 2018, I believe, when the representative of the UN office here in UNDP office here in Belize left, things really slowed almost to a crawl, and now since February 2019 the project board has not met, despite our 3 organizations represented here have written to the government, to the Attorney General. The Attorney General's ministry is the focal point for UNCAC in Belize. We have written to them and reminded them, not a response, not even an acknowledgement.
And this is, the execution lies within the Attorney General's ministry. That is the office that spearheads this process.
And for good reason.
Because there are a lot of legislative changes that have to be made as well.
Well, not only that, I think what's important, if you go back to when the convention was actually put together by the UN, Kofi Annan did say, something, countries have to have buy-in.
Exactly.
And that's what's lacking in our case. I think we need to press the restart button on buying in. And it's not just the citizenry. It has to be our public officials.
I really want to touch on that because buy-in is important. And I think that if we look back on how we got to the signing of the UNCAC, it wasn't necessarily buy-in. No. It was the teachers shutting down the country
public
saying,
pressure.
We are not going to resume classes until all these issues are dealt with. And one of them was signing on to the UNCAC. Now, addressing corruption is something that takes great political will, and even some political pundits will say political suicide, because the tentacles, how far they reach, and the involvement of the people, it means you're kind of looking at your own self in the mirror and seeing, what am I turning a blind eye to or actually participating in? And so I think we can safely say there wasn't a buy-in, there was a pressure. And as a member of the public, it feels like, okay, so it was done, it was signed, there was activity to kind of give people the illusion of work happening, and then rightly so, as we always make the joke, it blew over like a breeze, and now no one's paying attention to the UNCAC.
I think we can simply put it this way. The political will to implement UNCAC in Belize does not exist. It does not exist. And as some of us have said repeatedly, even without signing on to the UNCAC, there are many things that we could have already done and been doing. Good example is the Integrity Commission, which we could talk about later, the Office of the Contractor General, and a number of other offices like that. And we could talk about these examples, but there is very little to none. One other
Because
example
we still haven't had a contractor general come in to replace the last one, correct?
Yeah, well, the legislation was just amended to according to the government, the way they justify it is for the pool to get larger from where they could select somebody to be contractor general. But therein lies a lot of questions.
Can you look at that at face value? So the contractor general, the reason we're told we can't get a contractor general is because that person has to make a commitment to say they're not going to take on any government contracts for a period of time. In other words, I won't get the job, secure myself for when I leave, which we have seen happen. That was part of the reason
but that's only a part
that we
of
were
it, you know.
that it was explained.
That is only a part of it. Who in their right mind, who really wants to do a good job, would want to take up such a position with no support, no secretariat support? The Office of the Contractor General, if I could refer to their latest report, which is 2015, some months ago they submitted 5 annual reports, you know, which tells you that for 5 years there were no reports from the Contractor General, which is why the Senate decided not to appoint the previous office holder. But in 2015, the Contractor General himself said that they needed 5 other officers within the office to support them: a legal counsel, a chief investigator, an information systems analyst, and an inspector for construction and non-construction projects.
And to date, none of that has happened.
None of that. It's just the Contractor General, and which is vacant at this time, and 2 office support staff. So the work of the Contractor General, of the CG or the Contractor General, is not just to review bids. It's the bidding process in its entirety. It's also going on the ground to see how contracts are being implemented. It's not meant to be an office job. So, but that's how it has been over all these years.
So in the face of all of that, nonetheless, is the fact that government still continues to put bids for put contracts out there and what have you, aside from the fact that the office is vacant. Correct?
Sonny, let me break it down to you. Nobody in their right mind, like how Mr. Salazar explained, would take on that job, because it would be basically taking a job where you're being set up to fail. The amount of contracts that you have to review for an entire year, you would have to review over 100 contracts per month in their entirety, from going into the letter of the contract, piece by piece, the text of the contract, to be able to ascertain that the contract itself is something that we can live with, that it is fair for both sides, and that it meets all legal requirements. Then you have to go again, do your field visits, and ensure that all the things that need to be there, the standards are met, and so forth. So there is no way that that office can function with 1 or 2 people. That has to be a very fully staffed. Fully staffed.
And that seems to be, and correct me if I'm wrong, a challenge with a lot of the structural systems that we have on paper. I'll give the example of the Public Accounts Committee. There is a committee, they convene, they meet, but they're discussing issues from many years ago. So while we may be addressing corruption or perhaps improper processes that took place 5 years ago, those very same practices may continue into today, which means we'll never catch up with fixing the problem if we're always looking in history rather than dealing with present. And so my question is, we've signed on to the convention. I recall that conversation after the visit to Jamaica, and they were very progressive in terms of changing the very same issue that we're talking about, that structurally, if you're going to put checks and balances in place, it has to be effective. It can't just be for face value to say there is an integrity commission, there is a contractor general, there is a public accounts committee.
Hence the reason we're not getting any buy-in, because no one wants to relinquish an ounce of power in who holds the reign to power in Belize. So that is our challenge. We spoke about earlier, the public pressure.
Yeah.
That's a quandary for us because it's difficult to urge our government to go in, or any government to go in a direction that they don't want when there's no incentive. And the argument could be made that, well, because we have individuals not being affected directly in their pocketbooks. So because it's this considered sort of out there, where it's just corruption, it's not affecting me personally. So there's no kind of groundswell or interest in any kind of movement to say we need to get this, because that's where the development of our country lies in terms of how progressive we are.
Is that a part of what we have failed to do? I think I attended maybe one session, to be clear, with a bit of sensitization on the UNCAC and looking at corruption. One of the critical points, which I thought was really important, was being able to simply have the proper definitions as to how corruption takes place and where it takes place. And I don't think that that's an issue that we bring to the public very often. We don't discuss it. We say corruption the way we say transparency and accountability, the kind of these lofty phrases that some people understand. But when you talk to someone who is doing their best to simply get by, they don't make a connection between a bloated contract and the fact that they're going to take out a loan every year for school.
Let me address that. There is different levels and types of corruption, right? And the hard and fast reality of it is that corruption cannot exist if the general public officers and us, citizenry, do not support it. But it has been ingrained in our social fabric that it becomes a part of our culture. That's why it's called the culture of corruption, because it becomes part of our culture. It's an endemic society that is, for the lack of a better word, normalized to the fact that they live with corruption in their daily lives. Now, that's one point, right? But the fact is, though, that if policies are in place, regulations, laws, that will drive at addressing the issues that are coming out of corruption, looking at the sources, the factors that drive corruption, and put things in place so that those are avoided, then eventually the society will have to come and follow through. Let me put out a scenario. If it is, like, for example, the Contractor General's office is activated properly and he can do his job, then all those bloated contracts would eventually have to stop, because he would be pointing out the areas that are outside of the norm.
He or she,
that are
maybe
fair.
we need a woman.
Maybe we need a woman. More than likely be a woman. More than likely. Because it would take a lot from somebody, a lot of focus, a lot of drive. And to be honest with you, I come from a place at the NTUCB where we work together with the International Labour Organization. We do many conferences with them at the regional level. And one of the things that we've learned from them is that women are far better managers than men. And that is a fact. Statistics prove that whenever women take over any company or any department that was not functioning, things start to work the correct way. So I would agree.
I have another example, a burning thing that has been on my mind for a couple of days, and perhaps you guys can weigh in as to how it fits into transparency, accountability, and good governance, etc. All of these things. A news story was ran several times on the repair work that is happening on this swing bridge, right? And you're using public funds to be able to address this issue of the decay and the damage that's happening with the bridge. But there was not a bidding process as far as we know. And the exact quantum of how much the contractor is being paid still remains a question, even though certain figures are thrown around loosely or what have you. Point that I'm making is, though, it would seem as if though a heavy focus is placed on central government in the context of UNCAC, but then there are also all of these municipal bodies that deal with public funds as well.
Well, look, I'll respond by referring to what Mr. Mora said about the culture of corruption. We cannot have our cake and eat it too. If the opposition is serious about, if they expect to form the government one day, then they must walk the walk, not only talk the talk. So transparency is needed across the board. Municipal level, central government level, private sector.
That's right.
And we need to point out that this convention does not only refer to the public sector, it's also the private sector. There is a lot of private sector corruption happening.
So I said there's different types
Yes.
of corruption.
Yeah.
But I want to highlight something that you brought up. You mentioned about what the incentive would be for the general public, for the lay persons that are out there. The incentive is the following. If you would take out, and anybody who wants to be challenged and take on the burden of doing some research, if you would take out corruption out of a system, the development that you would get would be exponential. Our standards of living would increase exponentially. So what we're seeking from the government when we are saying, we want the government to do this for me, the government is failing, the government can be addressed if you take out the issue of corruption.
Let me refer very quickly to the challenge there. I agree with everything Mr. Mora is saying, but here is a challenge. In 2018, our same project board commissioned a survey to look at the gender aspects of corruption, if you recall, Mr. Sanchez. And it wasn't a scientific survey, but the results were more indicative as a result. But people across this country were surveyed. And what that determined is that the people who are paying or suffering the most from corruption are the ones from the lowest income strata. They're the ones paying the most. Why? They have to pay money to be given attention for their land papers, for example, to be given attention, etc. The higher income persons have more options. They could hire an attorney to do their job for them. They could hire a customs broker. You could call your friend. But the ones in the lowest or lower income brackets, they have to shut up. They have to pay. They're the ones who are really suffering the most out of it.
Hence what I said, they are the ones that are upholding corruption.
Let me give you a simple example. Vital statistics. We've heard stories, all kinds of stories.
Horror
I can never
stories.
forget going to the office one day and meeting a lady that had a toddler and a baby in her hand. She came from Toledo. That was her third visit to Vital Statistics. This is a while back. I'll be clear, maybe 4 years ago. But I just kept thinking, and on that third visit, her documents were still not ready. That was 3 round-trip tickets with her children to Belize City from Toledo for simply doing the process, the regular process. While we know other people are able to get their documents with a little, what I said, grease the pocket or a little help. Much
Express
easier.
service.
And so that's how, even if they don't financially pay, it pays to play it straight
It does.
in this country.
It does.
And you could mention so many more
I mean,
examples.
so that's one example that
The
comes
passport
to mind.
office is another.
But that is also another story we can look at. But I'm gonna ask the question, and then we can take a break, give you some time to think of your answers. So, because we talk about corruption, and we very easily point the finger towards government systems, and you're right. It takes a lot more people to be involved, including the private sector, including the public service. So I want to ask, in the absence of the momentum being taken by the government at this time, what's happening within the private sector, within the public service, and even within the advocacy bodies to perhaps do your part in being able to get people sensitized and to push for the proper implementation of UNCAC? And so I'm going to leave that to find out about your personal responsibility. When we come back, we'll get their answers. So please stay tuned.
Belize Bank's Christmas Flexi Loans are here.
And we're back and we're continuing our conversation as to where we are in the implementation of the United Nations Convention Against Corruption. Today is actually International Day Against Corruption, and it's 3 years since the signing of the UNCAC. We have with us two representatives, Senator Salas from the Belize Network of NGOs, and Giacomo Sanchez representing the Belize Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Unfortunately, Mr. Mora had to leave us. He had some union duties he had to attend to. But we are continuing with the conversation, and the question I left with was looking at, while you have stated that since February of this year there's been no meeting with the project committee, and that things have slowed down in terms of the rollout, My question is, what are you doing within your own agencies to perhaps either build awareness, sensitization, or get everyone on board on working towards the execution of UNCAC?
Yeah. So if we take it from the larger private sector standpoint, I think we need to appreciate that it's not a unilateral type of response.
Yeah.
Private sector just won't come along that way. And if you look at the tenets of the convention itself, it speaks directly to the government taking the lead in ensuring that there's the proper instruments that then guides how private sector will do their daily business. So to a great extent, private sector, the more mature within our economy, taking care of themselves. They're doing their audits according to international standards and all that stuff with all the required disclosures that goes along with that process. But then there's a rapid growth in medium and small business.
Yeah.
And those aren't accounted for. We're not seeing. So what? Think about it. If you go back to 2002, there was some movement in terms of changes to the legislation relating to the Companies Act. Companies Act guides a lot of what business does. That has been sitting there since then. And no one has ever, decided to make any changes. I mean, from a private sector standpoint, that is something, if that legislation is upgraded, then there's been some tweaks over the years, which is rather inconsequential. So where we are today, if something as basic as just a Companies Act that guides how companies in Belize operate, that would be a stone throw way of getting closer to what is expected from the private sector. So the private sector cannot be left alone to.
Well, you can't regulate yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so
but you can function with integrity.
Correct. And so a great deal of businesses are at that level, but unfortunately the expectation is that so everyone is kind of going at the same drumbeat, and that is not where we are right now.
I have heard on several occasions from senior government officials that it shouldn't only be the public sector, and what about the private sector? But as we were just discussing, we expect the government to take the lead and set the example.
Yeah.
And many in the private sector, and I don't think this is any justification, but they say if the government is not setting the example, then why should we? I think that's not a valid argument, but that's they are cop out in a way. Right? So the government must take the lead. It is the government that legislates and that implements the laws. So they are the ones who need to put these different instruments in place.
The size of the government and the robust nature of everything that happens within that umbrella, I think, and it's just my opinion, that perhaps it would be wishful thinking to believe that you can do away with corruption altogether, particularly if you begin at the government level. Because if they can't get it right there, then how do they turn to the wider society and say, okay, these are what we need to do, these are the steps that we need to take in order to stamp out corruption?
Well, Mr. Sanchez said the right instruments need to be put in place and strengthened, and the agencies that are charged, and we need to also mention the FIU, Financial Intelligence Unit, that are charged with looking after these things, need to be given the proper tools and the resources. The FIU, from a couple of meetings I've had with them over the last couple of years, they estimate that they really need to look after almost 2,000 groups, organizations, and companies. That's a whole lot with the small staff that they have. So they need the resources, and
not to mention,
one way. Yes, go ahead.
Just to complement what you're saying, that's what they might be saying, but the reality is, if you look at just the company's registry, there's in excess of 8,000 entities registered.
Yeah,
so
there you go.
In terms of a regulatory capacity,
Yeah.
I mean, they have their hands full.
But, and it's right here in the UNCAC, the aspect of illicit enrichment. If we look at that one alone, if we are serious about tackling corruption, look at that aspect of illicit enrichment. We know the average Belizean out there knows who can afford what or who cannot afford what. We know.
Absolutely.
So it is a matter of going there and asking for records, and if you can prove it, then you should be in trouble.
This is where it really goes back, and it's, you know, I know very often when people hear conversations like this, it's always thinking, oh, well, you're just jumping on the government. Well, there are leaders. A government they're representatives of us. They're the people we vote to be able to execute what will be in our best interest in this country. And if we are collectively saying, well, we're tired of corruption, then you have to do something about it. But it takes great political will.
It does. It does.
You know, you speak about what people can afford and can't afford, and I always think to myself that Belize is designated as an upper middle income country. And if we are to be honest with ourselves and we look around in our own country, who are we fooling?
Yeah.
You know, the majority of people are not living upper middle income.
But
They're
this-
very wealthy people,
Yeah.
and there are many very poor people.
The disparity is great.
Just let's go back to the Sania's point about the size of government and the task or the undertaking there. Do recall we have on planet Earth a few companies that are larger than the budget that the government of Belize has to manage. And they have minimized to a great extent the kind of leakages that we're experiencing as a government. Yes, the government model as a public sector entity is a little different, but nonetheless, it's no different from a major corporation that managing billions of dollars. So it is achievable in terms of minimizing, because it's an illusion to think that it will go away 100%.
Yeah.
So
We need to mention and acknowledge, Joe, Mr. Sanchez, and I know you'll agree with me, that we have good public officers.
Oh, yeah.
There are people there that really are trying and want to do the right thing. So just before Mr. Nigel Hawk left, it's about a year now, no? We were in discussion of a new slew of legislation, such as whistleblowers legislation and witness protection legislation. The discussion had started. Since his departure, nothing. But these are two examples of new laws that we need to put in place so that people who want to do the right thing and are seeing these horrible actions could report it and be protected. In a small country like Belize, with a small population, that becomes very challenging because we like to say we all know each other.
The last
but there are
whistleblower was
mechanisms that can be
publicly
put in place.
disparaged for coming forward with information that eventually kickstarted an
But that's why we need the
investigation.
legislation to protect these people and for the mechanism to be put in place so that there are people in there that want to do the right thing.
correct.
You know, gentlemen, you are involved in the execution or the rollout as a part of the project committee. From your experience, how would you gauge the will to drive this process forward? Is it personality based? Is there a general adaptation that there is a drive to, I mean, we won't become a completely corruption-free country, and it won't happen overnight. It's going to take, again, political will and some time to be able to roll out.
Yeah.
But are you getting from where you sit that this is actually something that we're taking seriously?
I'll say no, because I think something as granular as reviewing or existing legislation and the changes that is required, the changes that are indeed required are really implementing checks and balances. And I don't think our government officials, that they've identified it and realized that, you know, that's too much giving up of the power that resides in their office. So that's where the difficulty is. That's why there's no buy-in. That's why we're not going anywhere quickly.
It needs to be civil society that really takes up the mantle to keep bringing that pressure, because from the government it won't happen. And I would not be surprised if there is a change in government for that same approach to be taken, because as you said before, to effectively tackle corruption, fight corruption, you are agreeing as leaders of this country to give up a lot of power.
Yep.
And that's one of the hardest things to do. The easiest thing is to perpetuate yourself in power.
And
I think if you look at any of the, currently we're going through sort of a mini silly season, and then we're going to the general election.
Oh, I was going to get there. How realistic are we being,
No, but
even in sounding the alarm
But
right
at the
now?
end of the day, we can look right now, look at any of the documentation coming out of either side.
Yeah.
There is no coherent message to say this on day 1 to day 100, we want to have these achievements as it relates to corruption or any of the low-hanging fruits, because the implementation of the the UNCAC is not a difficult process. And there are a few low-hanging fruits that we can
If we're describing certain things to be a matter of a lack of political will, can it then be argued that perhaps this is deliberately being drawn out so that come 2020, whoever succeeds in this particular administration will have that headache to deal with once the people come forward again and clamor for it?
Look, in the whole aspect of UNCAC implementation, right, at the project board level, Mr. Sanchez, myself, and the NTUCB rep, Mr. Enriquez, we proposed for government to include in the central budget, in the national budget, some funds for UNCAC implementation. We made that proposal in writing as well. I remember debating the budget this past March. There was not one mention of UNCAC. And in the Attorney General's ministry as a focal point for UNCAC, no, I take it back. There was one mention of UNCAC in the office of the Auditor General. In the Attorney General's ministry, and nowhere else in the budget document was a mention of UNCAC. So that shows you right there that the interest is not there. And we cannot keep depending on external funding to drive this implementation process forward.
Yeah.
The first year was UNDP, and the person heading the office at the time was extremely supportive.
Yeah.
We were very active that year. The second year, I think it was CARICE funding under the through the U.S. Embassy, and things slowed down.
Yeah.
We need to drive that process. We need to put some funds.
It goes back to
But
what
it's
we were
also
saying,
it's also
though.
counter. I hate saying it because it's almost saying that it's okay, but very often to invest in
It's
anti-corruption
upfront investment.
legislation, it means to cut off your own feeding tube.
Yeah.
And we have to be honest about that. I mean, if we look at this time, and Giacomo, I'm glad you mentioned it, because perhaps even with sounding this alarm today, maybe someone gets irate and starts to agitate for some action. It's very unlikely, moving into an election cycle, that we're going to see any questions about looking at contracts and where money is being fleeced. You know, if $500,000 goes into one campaign or another campaign out of a contract for a road, nobody's going to take the time now to say anything about it, because that's critical for election season. And that's, I mean, this is like, that's a lower end estimation as to what may be coming out of some of these contracts.
Financing reform or
another important
need,
piece of legislation.
the need for us to have those regulations in place to be able to monitor how kickbacks work, or to be able to monitor how campaigns are being funded and through which medium.
So what should we do?
Well, my question was going to be, you mentioned low-hanging fruit. If there were something that we as a society can say, because we have to be realistic as to what we'll be able to achieve, what would be some of the immediate actions that even at the project committee you've identified that it just takes a little bit of action to move into implementation? What are some of the things that we're looking at? Because I know the UNCAC, and to be clear, this hasn't been rolled out in just Belize. This has been implemented in many other countries. So it's not like we're reinventing the wheel or it's an insurmountable challenge.
Two things: the Public Accounts Committee that you mentioned earlier, and of course the Integrity Commission.
Exactly.
What about
And-
the public
and the
accounts?
Contractor General's
Let's say
office.
that the Integrity Commission, if you look at the template that Jamaica used, they essentially took whatever the convention was guiding, and they actually put it into force.
Yeah.
And there's where we need, because the Integrity Commission doesn't necessarily only need a secretariat support, but they also need some autonomy. And there are mechanisms and ways of achieving that. But out of political convenience, I guess, it's frowned upon, at least for now.
But having a secretariat would go a long way. I need to mention, look,
Yes.
our Prevention of Public Corruption Act stipulates it right there that there must be a secretariat, and the 4 or 5 key posts that there should be. For years, we've only had the actual commission, the commissioners, and 2 office support staff. So how in the world will they do their jobs to oversee all area reps, all senators, all municipal officers at the city and town councillors?
You're looking in excess, at least for elected officials in Belize, just in excess of about 1,100 people. Now that's 1,100 annual registrant who are filing their report.
Should be.
And it's not just to file.
That's
I
what I
mean,
was
you
thinking.
need an
goes
office
beyond
that actually
yeah.
goes in and do some
Forensic
analytics.
investigation.
To analytics to make sure that, you know, something, Any,
this
any
Because-
unexplained wealth can be.
Exactly.
How does someone offer him or herself for a public office, gets elected, and at the point where that individual was initially campaigning, everyone knows where he lives, everyone knows what's going on in terms of the job that he holds, what have you. The minute that individual becomes elected, he becomes a millionaire over the course of the 5 years, and then how
Which is
does
why-
he amass that wealth?
Which is why it should go beyond filing.
Exactly.
As Kimo has said, it needs to go into investigation, forensic investigation, right? And then we'll get into exactly what's happening. So,
And the failure goes many ways because perhaps we don't communicate sufficiently the amount of money that a minister should be paid. It's not that much. I mean, it's a lot for some people, but it's not enough to account for the level of wealth that we now see some elected officials having. And we have to be honest with ourselves as a society. If I am looking at my area rep and he went from, a nice home to a mansion and
5, 6
multiple
properties,
vehicles
yeah.
and tons of vacations, and the minister's salary is what? I think we reported once or twice when we were talking about the absent minister from the House. But that's what they're supposed to be making?
2 years ago, we celebrated this very day, this very date, with an anti-corruption symposium, if you recall.
Correct.
And our keynote speaker was the head of Botswana's anti-corruption agency. And he laid out what they do. And in an instance like that, the example that we're referring to, they freeze your assets.
Yeah.
They freeze it until you can demonstrate how come you have that and legitimately have that. And they have fared in Botswana. Botswana have their own challenges too, but that's why they decided that they needed to set up an independent, fiercely independent anti-corruption entity. And we could also talk about the Electoral Commission, which in Jamaica is also independent. And so this discussion really can go into various areas. But what to do, we were talking, right, it's a pity Mr. Mora had to leave early, but they just came back from their annual general meeting at Kikaka just yesterday and Saturday. And he shared that one of the things they decided is that they will set up a committee within the NTUCB to develop policy statements to present to the political parties. And I shared with him that within the Belize network of NGOs, we're also thinking to do something similar to that. So we will be talking about as social partners working together to develop such statements and proposals to submit to the political parties and the public with recommendations and demands. That is part of what we can do.
Yeah, in the chamber itself, we have an anti-corruption task force, but that was primarily guided so much by how much momentum we had gotten from the actual implementation, and so the work that we were doing there was more like on the advocacy side and just public sharing and all that good stuff. That had slowed because of everything just slowing down. But I think in going into 2020. There'll be a resurgence more so to engage government more, because I think that is what needs to be done. It cannot be just that we're speaking to the public and not to the public officials.
There are a lot of people who perhaps are watching this and just dismissive, that nothing's going to change, that this is going to be the way things continue.
It's not your typical Christmas subject.
No, agreed. But one, I would argue we should be having every day until it changes.
Yes.
And maybe that's what we could close off with, kind of just looking at why it's important that we get this problem under control. We know it exists without pointing fingers, without having facts. There's enough for us to see, that we've heard, that we all know about personally, to know it exists, and it exists from the highest level to the everyday man. But we got to start with the implementers first.
Fighting corruption costs. It's expensive, but it is worth every penny that we put towards it. Because then, if we look at public contracts alone as an example, we'll start to get the real bang for our money, the real bang for our money, instead of shoddy construction and multiple repairs. That's money literally down the drain. So whereas in the short term it may cost a lot, in the in the medium to long term, we'll start to see the fruits of fighting corruption.
Yeah.
That's why we must do it. We must not give up, remain optimistic, and keep pushing for change.
Yeah, possibly saying the same thing, but in a different, from a different angle. It fundamentally has to do with our country's development. If we want to see change and rapid change, you spoke earlier about someone traveling from Toledo to Belize City. I mean, if we spend a little extra dollar in ensuring that we get that entire system electronically, people don't have to be traveling and costing them extra. Yeah. And then the revenues to the government goes straight into the kitty, as opposed to this layering of costs that goes along with having to travel and having people facilitate transactions for you. So, in a nutshell, it's about our development, how quickly we develop, and everybody benefiting in the long run.
Yeah. All right.
And our individual responsibilities, we must not forget.
And we all have to keep on asking the question as well as we move into election season. You know, you can ask the person who comes around to campaign to your house, what are you going to do about corruption? We're 3 years in, and you keep on asking the question until we can get some answers that we're happy with. But thank you for coming in and giving us some of the answers so far.
To celebrate International Anti-Corruption Day.
All right. We're going to go ahead and take a break, and we'll be back in a few. Stay tuned. are back, and as we said, it's time to get the Christmas programming going. And one of the more important parts of Christmas is all the music and entertainment we can find. When we talk about Belizean Christmas, some songs that come to mind, written and performed by this man right here, Brad Patico. Good morning.
Sir. Good
Morning. Well, I
And-
said it to you, I could extend that morning. You know, I've learned through the years that a great man from the Radio Belize era,
Seferino.
Seferino Coleman.
yeah, was good morning, Boite Binafi, Shaoshan Salom, and you know, like
Muy buenos dias.
buenos dias. You know, see, wonderful.
Like 5 languages. And
yeah,
that
and in a Creole, which is a wonder, man.
That's it, right?
that's how he opened his show every morning, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Card.
Yeah.
That's right. And you know, I gotta say the excitement that we have to have you here is Sonny was singing for us earlier, right?
Well, we have to put the sound on the spot this morning, but I think we
I was
have a
just-
duet.
Just so that the public is aware of what the conversation is. Right? Mr. Patico, I recall as a boy listening to radio, and at the time it was Radio Belize, right?
Yes.
And its sister station was Friends FM, right? When you listen to Radio Belize, you heard a lot of music that was local. You have your Lord Rayburn, you have your music,
Right.
Mr. Peters and the Bowman Chime. And there is this one Christmas song that has always stayed with me. And I won't sing it because I don't want it.
We'll sing with you. Come on, you did it.
Just a little
like
You
snippet,
want to get
right?
the strings
goes
out,
like
right?
this,
You know,
yeah.
it goes. Well, actually, there are two. This is the one that I
You're most known
I-
for.
you know, I mean, I don't want to say love the best, but
Here we
Hear
go.
you.
it comes to mind, right? If I get up, this is another Christmas morning. Get out your stockeroo, get out your wine, get out your whiskey, get out your hammer cake, man, and dance and sing now and listen to what I say. Make music ring now, for it is Christmas Day. Mestizo sing parang, what happens up? For the Christmas.
I just think
I
that
do for my chime, have accordion, but all I really want to make my music is come a paper, a spoon, a grater. So upside down your broom and beat the rhythm. Make music ring now, for it is Christmas Day. I wish I had the whole band, man. You know,
Oh,
that'd be
yeah.
nice, you know, bringing everybody.
But that was great.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Right.
So you have to
Good
do an
stuff.
updated version of the song that also includes that we need to have Brad Patico with his harmonica to.
Yeah, we tried that.
Good
So
job. Good job.
that was one of the hits, and
And
especially
we
with
have-
Christmas.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
You know, we have the.
he's ready to play. You know, I gotta say, he went from cautious to like, "Are you guys sure?" to now you're ready. Jam
You know,
session start.
Here we go with the. Come make we bring back the old-fashioned Christmas with Bowman Chime and sorrel wine. I said to come make we bring back the old-fashioned Christmas with caroling. When the people sing on Christmas Eve, with the ram party, food and drinks hearty, turkey with rice and beans, salad with local greens, and the Jankuno entertain no Christmas. True Christmas. You know, I sit there and think, you know, like when I look, I go back on Facebook and you know, look at it, like I see Channel 5 and then they pop up the old program where I'm like, man, I say, wow, this is so cute.
Back in the days.
No, I
remember them
love
as a
it.
boy. I mean,
Yeah, right,
growing up
right.
to your music has always been a thing.
So it's great to have you here. Thank you so much for that, for being able to perform. And I mean, you've been back in the country, you said 4 years now, right? There we go.
How much younger
that
you?
guy?
Those were the
Who
had
is
ear.
the guy?
Yeah.
Well, you're masking it right now. Nobody knows.
Yeah, right. You kind of, cover. This is what we call cover up.
Yeah.
Did you know back then that you'd be making such an iconic song, or such iconic songs?
Well, the songs are written by Governor General Sir Colville Young.
Yeah.
I remember how this thing got started some years ago. I was a little kid then, but I was still singing. And I met him on Cemetery Road by Amara Avenue.
Yeah.
And in the conversation that we had, he brought up, he said, I would love for you to do my songs. And I never thought anything of it. I never really wanted to follow it up type of thing. There wasn't something that, but I remember when I was working at the U.S. Embassy, in the office, the USS office, had a separate office from the rest of and he would come in the afternoons and he'd be popping these songs and like he'd be jiving, the movements and everything. So I got to learning them in the office, at the embassy. And I took them with permission, of course,
Yeah.
And I remember the nights that we recorded these songs. And I remember going home one night with my family. We nearly,
Yeah. Bring it down. Yeah.
we ran off the road and that nearly took my family. But,
Yeah.
the good part is we're left with something. We
Yeah.
have something to cherish.
So the songs are originally written by the Governor General.
Those two. We have a few more too.
Okay.
I love his songs. I have to play all of that.
All right, tell us.
Angels rest in their robes of glory, fill the pastures with heavenly light. Angels' voices with hallelujah, bringing joy to the world tonight. No need to be frightened, shepherds, just listen to what they sing. Peace and goodwill to men from Christ the King. Da-dee-dum, da-dee-dum, da-dee-da-dee-dum, da-dee-dum, da-dee-dum, da-dee-doo-doo-doo.
All right.
Just a part of
Clearly,
it,
I can see how much you enjoy playing this music.
It's a lot.
Have you been performing since you've been back?
Yes, I have. I have engagements for the 21st, which is a show at it's Brockdown Music.
Okay.
At the Battlefield Park.
Yeah.
Where we will be honoring the late Wilfred Peters, And I'd be more than glad to do some of his songs, or one of his songs at least, So.
Yeah.
And then I have a performance on the 18th with the National Library Service. Okay. And I'll be performing at my birthday, which will be in Burrelboom on the 23rd of December, right at my place,
Okay.
So I don't want to say welcome,
that's a celebrity status when you host your birthday party, right?
That's right. But I'll have the group there ready to go. The group consists of Mark Phillips on guitar.
Yeah.
And we have Michael Usher on the steel pan, and then Dean, the keyboard man, will be performing also. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
Let's get a bit deeper in our conversation insofar as the place for Belizean music and Brockdown music in particular on the radio, because again I sit here and I'm in total awe going back to my childhood because I could recall at that point in time a lot of effort and investment was made for Belizean music to dominate the airwaves, not so much today. And I believe because of that, the younger generation, dare I say, is very much lost on your music.
Yeah.
As I recall, but someone who's considerably younger than I am wouldn't even know who Brad Patrick is or his music, and have a vague idea of what Brockdown music is.
I've found that out,
Yeah, wow.
But the thing is, I think the radio station or whatever, the media has got to have a way of presenting the music in a way that young people will listen to it.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I was sharing with one of my media family, Rene Villanueva, is like telling a story behind the songs, you know. And I asked him, I said, do you know the song Zaiden Wata Gat Me So? You know, and nobody knew about Zaiden Wata Gat Me So, you know what I mean? But it's because I collect songs, I go and investigate about the songs of our ancestors, you know. And really, it's mostly like our ancestors now for true, because man, it's getting rarer and rarer.
But you
know,
see,
so-
when you start to sing the song, this is where I find it so interesting. No matter what top hit is out right now, nobody will understand a Belizean Christmas like us as
Like a
Belizeans.
Belizeans, right, yeah, that's
So
true.
it's the mention of the Jankono and Mr. Peters and the accordion to what it would feel like having a Christmas here in Belize.
Yeah.
We're the only ones who can capture that. And
Well-
that's what the songs have done, the more iconic ones over the years.
Right. But what I'm saying is that, you know, our younger generation, you know, I remember my wife and I going to a session on Mahogany Street one day, and the picnic said, oh, they're going to sing Nelly stupid song. You understand what I mean? So that in their mind, you know, if you sing, go sing one of the old songs, let's pick one.
Good morning, Miss
Good
Lady.
morning, Miss Lady, right?
That's common.
I mean, way they telling. What's the message that it's bringing out? You know what I mean? And so I think if you sit back and explain why these songs were written, how they were written, you know, like the Zaiden Wata Gat Me So has a story behind it. It was this guy that went to Zaiden, which was the store by the big bridge at the time.
Yeah.
And they sold overproof liquor, you know, and they had the big Jimmy John, the one where you have like the handle shape, like, you know, hook. And you go lifting up one by each side. So then carry this big Jimmy John, load it in at the truck. At that time, trucks used to go into the villages and towns and that sort of stuff. You know, that was our only mode of transport, you know. And when they put the thing in, the thing dropped and it broke. And the liquor flow in all the little pothole and say, all the people around Water Lane come with a little milk pan and a little cup and everything. And they start to get this overproof rum. They say, after that, Water Lane, people by Water
That was
Lane
the
block
best
up in about 2 weeks.
They probably had the best
You understand? So you tell that story and you sing the song, you get a response. You know what I mean? I think it'll be more interesting than
sounding.
Do you have a desire to be able to perhaps find a way to reach out to younger audiences?
I do.
Yeah?
Yes.
What ways have you been exploring?
And I'm doing that. One of the ways I've been encouraged, and like sometimes I hate to pop things when it's not really set, you know what I mean? But one guy was suggesting going into schools throughout the country, and you know what I mean, getting this music in. And I have a heart for children. I like to sing for children, to entertain them, to you know, just associate with them, you know.
Perhaps I can throw something out there and you can explore it. You represent the older generation, right? There is Coconut Boy, who represents the younger generation of broke-down musicians.
Right, and he's good.
So perhaps a collaboration, because he has an audience among young people, so perhaps a collaboration can get the message across.
The old and the young. Let's go. Yeah.
And then there's also, we had on Friday, Peters Boom and Chime, which is the family
son.
of Mr. Peters who are trying to carry it on. So I see, you know what has happened? We have seen where Garifuna music has become so celebrated. You know, the idea of pushing cultural music at one point seemed impossible, but we've seen it grow. And now I think people are recognizing we need to do the same with our Brockdown. We need to give, you know, Leela Vernon, Mr. Peters, all of these people who have been stalwarts, to give them that level of prestige as well.
Right.
Yeah.
And respect.
And respect, yes.
Certainly.
So,
you know, I honestly, there are some places that I would have said dread playing. And it's because, you know, like I went to a function in my own village. I love my village, Burrell Boom. I love my village. And I have to say it because I want to know that I love them. So And they had a performance for the kids on a Friday night, and the kids were outside screaming and hollering, and you know, it was like, should I be playing over this? You know what I mean? I had to.
Yeah.
You know, it was difficult for me.
Yeah.
But yet I didn't want to let down the people that were there.
Yeah.
So I go and I play this music, you know what I mean? But I like to have an audience that is kind of attentive and want to share and learn and carry
Want to
on.
engage
you know what I
in
mean?
the
This kind of
music.
stuff. Yeah, right. Yeah. So-
Well, I hope that you do pursue your idea of working along with some of the kids. You could go in classrooms and teach them the lyrics and they can sing it together. I definitely think you could get Coconut Boy or some of the other ones to maybe
Teach them
do
the harmonica.
They do, but not only that, they do all kinds of remixes now with songs. So you have like a collaboration between you two on an old classic. That would be beautiful as well.
Like you know, the one, I look back and I used to have the Mahogany Chips come and play and, you know, do presentations when I used to work at the Villa. And how do you people get free commercials by it? Collect, you know. But anyway, you know, I used to listen to these guys and the natural way of going. I mean, and I think that should be brought down. Brought down has got to, you have to be loose with it. You can't tighten up.
You can't be
have
too
to be,
uptight.
you have to be ready for it, you know. And
I like
was
your
listening.
pose with the guitar there because it exudes that looseness, right?
Yeah. So I was listening to one the other day, a chip off from the Mahogany Chips, you know what I mean? And remember, it's Mahogany Chips. So I mean, several chips all over the place. But then guys, they made it broke down with the jawbone of an ass, you know, and then they had the accordion and the banjo and the drum and everything sounded so well.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They did this song. And the thing is, it looked like before they do their performance like that, they have to have a little tatito.
Standard fare, man.
Yeah, so they look like they have over the amount of tatito again now.
All the way to
Yeah, right. So they made it do the song. No, I would say the song again. You know, the Christmas song. Wait a minute, said
Which
earlier.
one? Good Morning?
Good Morning. But the way how they do it. And this is the thing we get. Good morning, Miss Lady. How you do this morning? I come to like a complaint this Merry Christmas morning. And I see you had a baby, and he had in the high grass. And the busy little bee was passing, and he's singing up on me. And I'm not going because next thing you know, I don't have voice.
I was going to say, that sounds painful.
That would that would strain you, you know, strain you to death. You know, you have a long program, you don't do that, leave that for the last.
You sure it was the tat or that was their style of singing? I don't know.
Check this out though. If you are Belizean and not know that Anansi had a baby and hide in a high grass, something is wrong, right? Something is totally wrong.
Well, you know, I'll be honest with you, I'm sitting here and my mind is wandering a bit and I'm thinking, you know, I have little ones in my family and I don't know if they know these songs. And I'm going to have to find the recordings and make sure that they do, because that's we have to all take it on. It's not that it's old-time music, and that's what you were saying. You didn't like playing for younger crowds.
It's called
we have to be able to understand that this is part of our culture and our,
You know, this is something we brought from the Mahogany camps.
Yeah.
And the story behind that, these guys used to write the songs at the camp. And there was a guy, he was a German by the name of Alonzo Schultz. And his way, he was, you know, also writing with the crowd too, of writers, you know, and they came out like on Christmas time. And he would go with a jawbone of an ass on his head and walk around from house to house. And then they would have this kind of, what they call the broke down thing, you know what I mean? Because you'd be there rattling and, you know, that sort of stuff.
And that's how some of the strange or different instruments came about, because it was kind of grab what you have around you.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Whether it was turtle shell or the jawbone or the grater. Or the triangle.
And that's the way people feel when you go to their houses, whatever they can pick up. You know, as they say, you know, you tap on the bottle
or comb and paper.
Comb and paper, spoon and grater. You know what I mean? But this is one of the songs that Alonzo, and there's another story behind this guy. Alonzo
You know what I
Schultz.
see you doing? I
Right?
gotta be very. You could do a full storytelling and singing session.
A
Like you
musical.
could, yeah,
Right,
yeah.
right.
You know, you see those sometimes people doing that because you clearly have taken the time to learn the history of the music.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, and it's interesting. It's
Yeah.
beautiful. It's colorful. I mean, I'll do the song, but afterwards I'll kind of tell you
Okay,
what it
go
is.
ahead.
No problem.
Charm me but no tear me, for I be a soldier of hell. You put a feather in a rat bat tail, you put Lord Hawk in a hell. Charm me but no tear me, for I be a soldier of hell. You put a feather in a rat bat tail, you put Lord Hawk in a hell. Why should Alonzo mourn when his home is far across the sea? Wishing if I could die, my friend. I am on my way, Pi Obispo jail, I am bound. Then the other part said, Mr. Seeley got one long mouth wife, mouth run off like a sow. More he have one long mouth wife, he mouth run off like a sow. Why should Alonzo mourn when his home is far across the sea? Wishing if I could die, my friend, I am on my way. Pi Obispo jail, I am bound now. Pi Obispo jail was the jail that we had at the time, which was over in Chetumal. We didn't have a jail in Belize. So when the people had a crime and they were guilty of whatever, serving time and things, it was over there that they go, right? Now, Alonzo Schultz, being a German, and said, why should Alonzo mourn when his home is far across the sea in Germany?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Wishing if I could die, my friend, I am on my way to Obispo jail. And for some reason, maybe, somebody went to talk, blabbed them out, and he got in trouble because of that.
That been a
And so
wife, the
he-
long mouth wife, right?
Oh, me.
Terrible.
Yeah.
I was thinking, you know, in this
Wrong,
modern
right?
day, there might have been some changes to lyrics now.
I think, so. You know, that one day, you know, sometimes I really don't want to sing that song by that part there, you know what I mean? But, you know, I mean, it's a story, you know, it's a
Yeah,
story. of
I
that
get
time.
you, I get you.
Right, right. You know.
So, of all the songs of your entire playlist in your mind, let's talk about your favorite Christmas song. What's your all-time favorite?
You know, I have this song that, you know, I learned from. Long time ago in Bethlehem, so the Holy Bible say, Mary's boy child, Jesus Christ, was born on Christmas Day. Hark now, hear the angels sing, a new king born today, and man will live forevermore because of Christmas Day. Then you can go on and sing the rest.
Yeah.
I will meet you out there sometime. But-
There's another Creole hymn too. Who is it? Mary had a boy child.
Mary's,
Let me see if you remember it.
Virgin Mary.
Aha.
Virgin Mary had a baby boy.
Yeah.
The Virgin Mary had a baby boy. The Virgin Mary had a baby boy, and they said that his name was Jesus. He comes from the glory. He comes from the glorious kingdom. He comes from the glory. He comes from the glorious kingdom. Oh, yes, believe us. Oh, yes, believe us. He comes from the glory. Come on, baby. He comes from the glorious kingdom. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, right.
I made you sound so much better just now.
Yeah, you built up the tempo and the appreciation level and everything, you know. Everybody said, wow, Marlene got it.
I know. It has been so great having you in. And as you said, there are a couple opportunities people can hear you perform. The 21st at the Brockdown Festival. The 23rd at your celebrity birthday bash in Boral Boom.
Yes, yes.
And also you
I
said
hope
the
that people don't come
18th.
because I can't buy enough chicken. Oh boy.
The 18th,
Alright,
you'll also
yeah.
be, I think you said the
At
Leo
the
Bradley?
Leo Bradley
Yeah.
Library Service for Children.
Okay.
I don't know if that's a public thing. I don't know how that would go, but you know, I was invited.
Well, the more people who go to a library, the better.
Yes, exactly. That's true, especially now.
Yeah.
You know, everybody's kind of, you know. But really, I thank you guys for inviting me and that I can share a little of what the Christmas spirit was, what it is, and what we can make it continue to be.
Yeah.
You know, because we want to impress on others that, yeah, you may have learned new stuff and things like that, but the old remain with us. You know, it's just a kind of something that I didn't have to come and write out anything to come to the show. Yeah. It's in here.
Yeah.
It's stored in there. And the same way, there are people out there who can, you know, make that that little brain function a little better by storing up some stuff of you.
Well, thank you for coming in and bringing a true Christmas for us here at Open Your Eyes.
Amen. Thank you very much.
We're going to go ahead and take that final break, and when we come back, we'll have our wrap-up, so stay tuned.
With over 100 years.
All right, and we bring back the old-fashioned Christmas with that final segment. That was so enjoyable.
Time for some sorrel wine or some sorrel stout.
That's that's what I'm saying. You know, we could tweak a little bit some of the lyrics, but no, I'm so grateful that Brad stopped in this morning. As we continue with the Christmas programming, we're going to make sure that we can get you up to date and provide helpful tips, but also kind of bring back just that feeling of Christmas as well. And I definitely felt that with some of those performances this morning. So which one is your number one?
The Boom and Chime Christmas.
Yeah.
Those songs have a special place in our hearts. Those of us who are contemporaries who grew up listening to radio, and even if it wasn't on the airwaves,
your neighbor was singing it.
Yeah, or they were going around from house to house actually performing, so you're familiar with them, right? And so when I sat on the couch and I listened to Brad with his guitar and harmonica. It took me all the way back to those days.
That's how I felt like part of my childhood come back. You're absolutely right. And but it was also great just to see the joy he has playing it. And I love that much. I think, you know, a lot of music, passion is a big part of it. And he clearly still has that passion. But it did also remind me that without having direct access to this type of music, we're gonna have to take it upon ourselves, you know, make sure your kids hear these types of songs and that the younger ones are exposed to them. And maybe, because we can't have too high expectations, they won't be open to it now, but they'll know it. And then as they become adults, they'll be able to build that appreciation over time. So I think step by step is the way to go, but we're grateful to Brad Patico for stopping in. Of course, you can catch him at the Brockdown Festival the 23rd, Leo Bradley Library the 21st for the Brockdown Festival, the 18th at Leo Bradley Library, and the 23rd in Boroboom. And we have to say thank you to Giacomo Sanchez, Senator Osmani Salas, and Marvin Mora for coming in and giving us an update on the UNCAC.
Yeah. 3 years later, there's still a lot of work to be done. Nonetheless, we commemorate the day as the day when the government signed on to the convention and sort of got things underway.
And, you know, I think it's just a good reminder to all of us. We can't let go of the pressure. And it starts sometimes just in the everyday conversation that you're going to have with whether it's a public servant or your friend in the private sector, amongst yourself and the family. And more importantly, when the election season comes around, people start coming to you with all these promises. Be sure to hold them accountable at that time as well. But that's all the time we have for today. Remember, if you want to contact us, send us an email at oye@channel5belize.com. You can drop me a line at marlene_oye@channel5belize.com. Find us on Facebook at Open Your Eyes BZ and check out the behind the scenes fun on Instagram at OYEBelize. Remember to tune in tomorrow morning at 6:30 when you open your eyes.
Start your morning right.
Until then, keep your eyes, your mind,
and your hearts open.
We'll see you soon. Enjoy your day, Belize.
Down to South Africa and Puerto Rico. Only one of you can be crowned our new Miss Universe. If for any reason the winner is unable to fulfill her duties, the first runner-up will take her place. Good luck to you both. The new Miss Universe is South Africa. Thank you.
Open Your Eyes was brought to you by the Belize Bank. Our country, your bank.